guys because there's some students who can't come, and I really wanted them to be able to hear what we'll be talking about. So we'll be posting this video just privately for our volunteers. But I have a series of questions just to help give some community context. So even if you're not going to be at the specific school that any one person is talking about, I think it's interesting to think about parallels, similarities, and differences across the 3 schools that we're working with. I know I anticipate learning a lot from the women here today, so hopefully we can turn our attention to them. So why don't we just start this way first with Myesha. If you could just talk a little bit about yourself and how you ended up at Gunn.
How I ended up at Gunn. Well, I mean, Gunn and being a school counselor was actually my first real job, in all honesty. So I kind of did the tradition where I went through college, graduate school right away, and I started at Gunn almost immediately. I actually started as an intern for 1 semester, and then I was hired on as a full-time school counselor the following year. So I don't have a ton of experience with different schools, okay? I've actually been at Gunn this is my 15th year. But this is my first year working as outreach counselor, so I don't have like an assigned caseload of students, but I oversee students in a smaller program, which is called the College Pathways Program. And basically, students in the program would be recommended by their middle school counselor, and ways in which you would get recommended would be most commonly students that are first generation college bound. So students that don't have a parent that has attended college in this country. About 80% of the students are also on our district's free and reduced lunch list, so that would imply lower socioeconomic status. Or students that, for maybe other reasons, are considered at risk or deemed as being underperforming, meaning they have been on some sort of a watch list or a DNF list for at least 2 grading periods. So that subset of students is probably the exact opposite of what a typical Gunn student may be described as. As you know, most of our students would come from Palo Alto. Some of them actually live on Stanford campus. If they have parents that work here, we have a handful of students that come from Los Altos Hills, and a few that would be bussed over from East Palo Alto or East Menlo Park. Like the majority of our students would be from Palo Alto. So when the average, I don't know what the average income is of a
I should
Palo
have
Alto
found
person.
that. That's a good question, actually.
It's high. It's ridiculously high. Versus students in our program where the average income is, or family income is around 40,000, which is like very, very different. So different in terms of access to just basic necessities, right? Obviously, access to any sort of educational additives like tutoring and things like that are going to be limited for students in the program. So the idea is that rather than expecting them to compete with their peers without having the same access and resources, we try and bring some of those components to the students on campus. So it is an after-out extracurricular program, so it's not a class. I meet with the students each grade level about once every 3 weeks, and it's usually either during lunch or after school. Right now we have about 150 students in the program, grades 9 through 12. And the idea is that they start off as a 9th grader, and then sort of I follow them all 4 years.
But we found the statistic, the median family income in Palo Alto.
163,000.
All right, so
Yeah.
what,
Compared to
a fourth?
40,000.
Yeah, that's about a fourth of the median income in Palo Alto. So again, there's a lot of challenges that come along with sort of being an other or a subset in a community like this. So some of the things, I'm kind of jumping ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Some of the challenges that our students would face would, come with things like being able to compete in terms of the classroom. Many of our students in the general Gunn population are, coming to high school on track for multiple AP classes and advance this and advance that. And that oftentimes is with or because of a lot of outside assistance. So they're taking prep classes and have tutors and all these other things, which kind of creates an unlevel playing field. So while we may never be able to totally level out the playing field, we do try and make sure that parents are aware of what they can do to support the students. So parent education is also a big piece. Also, many of our students are native Spanish speakers, and about half of our students' parents prefer communication in a language other than English, which sometimes poses a problem with them getting access to information and things at school too, so we're trying to bridge the gap there. We also serve all of the students, I believe, that are currently living in the Buena Vista Trailer Park, which I don't know if any of you follow the local news or have in the past. There's been, for years, a lot of controversy over whether the property was going to be sold and what would happen to folks that live in the trailer park, which is one of the last affordable housing areas or pockets here in Palo Alto. So in addition to displacing, a large number of families, and also that impacts diversity and, being able to have folks who have, regular jobs for a living, being able to afford to live in Palo Alto. So that's a layer of stress that, has been over many of the families' heads for a number of years. So for some of the students, it's working with them and their parents on like relocation and, figuring out what it would mean if they have to move out of the area and, transition plans and things like that.
Let's stop there.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Is that good? Okay.
And maybe if you could also talk a little bit about like your background and how you ended up in education. Just I think it's interesting for college students to hear career trajectories too.
Got it. Okay.
About that.
So I was, in terms of profile, like many of the students that I work with, I lived in East Palo Alto first, actually in my family, to graduate from high school, let alone go off to college. And when I was in high school, my counselor sucked. I mean, like, really bad. Like, discouragingly so. Like, oh, you want to go to college? Really? So, yeah, it was one of those.
Which high school did you go to?
I went to St. Francis.
Oh.
Yeah, right.
So tell them maybe about St. Francis, too, because a lot of them are not local.
Oh, I'm sorry. So it's a private high school in Mountain View, on the border of Mountain View and Los Altos. So in terms of, like, demographics of students, it's typical of what you would see in Palo Alto. And again, I lived in East Palo Alto many years ago, so it was even different from what it is right now. So again, the gap was huge. But yeah, my counselor sucked. It was discouraging, and I took that as motivation for me to be the opposite. Realizing how much because I didn't realize until after I got out of high school how much I would have benefited or was craving support and encouragement and someone to just say you can do it. So I set out to become the person to be on the other side of the table or the desk or the couch or whatever, telling someone they can't do it. So I'm actually happy I ended up exactly where I thought I would be and where I wanted to be, and it's like awesome, so fulfilling. I'm not gonna make $1 million or $2 million or anything like that. Probably never be able to buy a house in the Bay Area, but I love it. I get up every day and I love it. So, yeah. Awesome.
That'd be great. What should I cover?
Yeah, so why don't you do a little bit of your personal background,
Okay.
and then let's talk about the program and the school a little bit too.
Okay. School and program. Okay. So, I am originally from Colombia, from South America, and I moved to the States when I was very little, and moved to California when I was about 10. So I went to local schools. I actually went to Menlo-Atherton High School, and so I know that school pretty well. I was one of the, probably think I was the only Latina in my AP classes, which was a very uncomfortable place for me to be in high school, and some teachers were very supportive and aware of some of the stuff that I was going through with immigrant parents who didn't understand the college system even though they were educated people. And some teachers were not very supportive, and the teachers that helped me through personal stuff had an enormous impact on me. I had an English teacher who would let me just write forever about my parents' divorce and ignore the essay topic. And he would give me feedback on my writing, and moments like that really made an impression upon me about how amazing teachers can be in the life of someone who just needs someone to listen to them and validate where they're at and help them process that. I went to Stanford, graduated in '95. I did not think I wanted to be a teacher at the time. I was fascinated by the world of advertising, and so I worked for BBDO in San Francisco for a while, doing advertising, and loved that, but felt sort of empty, and so I switched gears. I contacted an old Stanford professor of mine who helped me kind of rethink things, and I realized that what I loved about advertising was really communication and helping people understand messages, and a lot of that is actually surprisingly what teachers do. And I love working with kids. So I went to Berkeley to get my master's in teaching credential and the turncoat. And then I actually taught at Menlo-Atherton High School. I taught English and Avid, and English as a second language, and I loved it. But for a lot of different reasons, I ended up leaving the classroom for a period of time, and now I'm back after having worked for Nickelodeon for a while, doing work with parents and parent education, and with greatschools.org in the city, which is kind of a more internet approach to helping parents and families in schools. I've joined Sequoia High School in Redwood City because they were really interested in getting more community engagement into the school. Sequoia is a big school like MA. We have over 2,000 students. We serve Redwood City primarily, as well as San Carlos, which is next door. We also have students from Belmont, East Palo Alto, Redwood Shores, Menlo Park. It is a large school, but we put in some measures to try and make it a smaller school, and I can tell you about those in detail, those of you who will be at Sequoia. But some of the reasons that I love working for Sequoia are that it's a little bit different than Menlo-Atherton when I was growing up. We're actually a majority-minority school, and so there is I think, about 60% of the students are Latino, and it makes for a different place than what I was used to growing up. The school is the oldest school on the peninsula. It was actually built at the same time as Stanford because the farmers in the area said, hey, wait a minute, they're building that beautiful university. We want a piece of that too. We want our kids to be able to go to Stanford. So it was built back in 1895, I believe, and it's been here ever since. So it has a long history, some ups, some downs. About 10 years ago, the school had a major shift and started bringing in programs like the International Baccalaureate program, which some of you might be familiar with, which is sort of similar to APs, but a little bit different. So we do serve, we have IB classes, and so we have a lot of very engaged, very academic students on campus. And then we also have a large population of students who are really struggling. About 60% of our students are Title I students, which means that they are on a free and reduced price lunch program, and they are also reading far below reading, where they should be in reading, so sort of a double whammy. We have a large percentage of ESL students, given what's going on in this area and how hard it is to find affordable housing. So you asked at one point, how has the election affected things? It's been really interesting. The wave of Silicon Valley jobs here in the Bay Area, both in biotech and in tech, has forced out a lot of families. And so some of our most fragile families who were, living 10 in a garage, they said, Uncle, I can't do this anymore, and I'm moving to Modesto, which is very disruptive to the kids and to the kids around them. So if we lose one family, cousins are affected, other friends are affected, and it feels like, oh my gosh, you feel more at risk. Redwood City used to be one of the last places that you could find affordable housing in the Bay Area, and that's changed a lot over the past even 3 years. And so the parents and families are under tremendous stress, working 3-4 jobs. And so the parents adore their kids and they would do anything to help them, but they just physically can't be at home. And that's led to some problems like after-school care. So to get to the programs, we have the students that you'll be working with are students who are struggling academically. It a lot of times tends to be students who are from low-income families, who cannot afford to pay for a private tutor, who cannot afford to take them to ballet lessons and tennis lessons and that kind of thing. So what Sequoia has is a pretty robust after-school program called SAFE. It stands for Sequoia After School Focused Enrichment. And what it means is that we want all of the students to feel like they have the same access to what everybody else is doing. So Myesha has kayaking lessons that her parents can pay for. I can't pay for that, but I can take kayaking lessons through SAFE. And so we sort of try to level the playing field a little bit. We have robotics, we have tutoring, we have tennis, we had makeup application, which was a super fun class. But the idea is that we're keeping the kids safe until mom and dad or somebody can get them home from school safely. So they are with us from the end of school, which is somewhere around 2:30 or 3:30, till about 6 o'clock. And they're taking classes, they're doing their homework, they're hanging out. They are receiving tutorial support. We feed them dinner around 5, and then they go home. And usually mom and dad come and pick them up. Some of them walk home on their own. But part of what we're trying to do is provide a safe time between after school and mom gets home, where they're not going to get tempted to make bad choices, because that's what it happens. That's the dangerous time. These are great kids. They think they know everything, because that's part of what you do when you're a teenager. I'm learning this the hard way with my own son, who's now 13. And so I can talk more maybe later about some of the things that I think you guys can work to your advantage in working with these students. So that's the after school program. The other program that some of you are going into is called Team Ascent. And Luis can also be a resource to you because he's worked with me for 2 years in Team Ascent. Team Ascent was designed about 6 years ago when we realized that a large portion of our incoming freshmen were coming to the school and making some bad choices. And we had 1 year where about 20-something students got expelled in the first few months of school. And the administration was in tears, and they said, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. Our little babies should not be getting expelled. That's it's absurd. So they had a big creative force behind this, and they created a summer transition program. So Luis worked for 2 summers helping us to, with a bunch of other interns, to help the kids realize that the change between 8th grade and high school is a big one, and we want to provide extra support for that. Then, after the summer is done, the great news is behaviorally they've bought in, they've fallen in love with the high school, they want to be there because they realize Luis is cool, and you know, he made me realize I shouldn't go cut class with my friends to go get Jamba Juice. I should just go to class. It's fun, and the people there are nice, so I'm not going to mess this up because the consequences are bigger in high school. So the good news is our expulsions down are now went down to about 0, and so that's a big change. But the bad news is that academically they're still fragile, and so the next step is providing them support during the school year. Their behavior has improved tremendously, so we've got that part figured out. We have resources to help with the behavior and the counseling, but now what we're really trying to do is help them with their grades and with the academics, because now they're like, I like the school, damn it, I want to be here, but my God, Algebra 1 is killing me. And it's devastating, it's absolutely devastating, and they feel like, screw it, I'm just gonna give up, and then we lose them, and that's what we don't wanna do. So I'm gonna get emotional, I'm so incredibly grateful to all of you guys that you're willing to help us get them through this next obstacle, so that then they start to feel a little bit more confident, and then off they fly into college. So, like I said, 60% or so of our kids are Title I, they fit into that category. But I'm really happy that we have between 91 and 97% of our kids going off to college by the time they're done with us. So that feels like a lot of good stuff is happening at our school. There's still a lot we have to figure out, but we have a great team, and now you guys to help us do that. So thank you.
Now Miriam and Kendra, maybe you can do a little bit of the self-intro and then explaining about MyLife.
Okay. So I grew up in East Palo Alto. I went to the 49ers Academy. Miss Gragg was my teacher, actually. 7th and 8th grade, right? 6th, 7th, 8th grade, that's right. Oh, that's because I got here in 5th. And after attending the 49ers Academy, I went to Eastside College Prep in East Palo Alto, then off to college in Pennsylvania. Came back after graduating and joined the 49ers Academy team. And I think after receiving everything that I received from the 49ers Academy, the really close relationships that I built with everyone, I feel like I'm in a really good position to help our students that graduate from the 49ers Academy over at the high school, helping them stay connected just as I was throughout high school with the 49ers Academy, accessing all of the resources that they had to offer. We started MyLife over at MA, which is a program where we're partnered with the Boys and Girls Club, and it's a 9th grade transition program, but we decided that we were going to follow our students up until graduation, and so right now we have 83 students.
Miriam, maybe you can also
Yeah.
just back up and explain what 49ers Academy is, because they probably don't know what that is.
49ers Academy is a middle school in East Palo Alto, and Ms. Gragg is actually going to give you more information about sort of the history of the district and some changes that
Actually,
have
kind of
happened.
go parallel.
Yeah, how about you go
Kind of
and do
right.
that?
So just with 49ers Academy, it's a neighborhood school in East Palo Alto, part of the Ravenswood City School District. It's a regular public school, but it does have a nonprofit. We're partnered with a nonprofit, so we're a public school with a nonprofit partnership to provide, like Miriam said, that just those extra supports and those wraparound services for students as they need it. And that program has kind of grown with the students. So as students like Miriam went on to high school and college, we kind of created this continuum of services, and out of that, was sort of born MyLife, which follows our students from 49ers Academy East Palo Alto into the Sequoia district, and specifically at MA.
In MyLife, yeah. And then I'll tell you a little bit about MyLife. So MA is about 2,300 students from the Atherton, Menlo Park, East Palo Alto, and Redwood City area. There are 47% Caucasian, 38% Hispanic Latino, 5% Asian, 4% African American, and 4% Pacific Islander, and 2% other. But my program is 72% Hispanic Latino, 12% African American, and 16% Pacific Islander. So we're working primarily with minority students at MA. And so something to keep in mind, and I'm sure you remembered and you touched on this, MA does at times feel like two different schools. And so I think this program kind of helps students alleviate some of that and access, not feel like they're outsiders, and feel like they have a home and they have a place at MA as well. And so our program is after school from 3:15 to 5 o'clock. Homework help, enrichment activities, tutoring, but there's a lot that happens throughout the day, which I think is one of the most important pieces of this program, which is helping parents stay connected in the school, know how to navigate the school system, connecting students with their teachers, going to observe the classes and see what's going on with your students that are struggling, and really just being a part of that student's team of advocates, and really making sure that they're getting everything that they need, that they're being treated fairly, and that that they're doing the best that they can. We're really trying to make sure that they have a successful transition into high school and a good chance at graduating. And what else do I talk about? MyLife related.
Can you maybe talk also a little bit more about MA and that kind of disparity that exists? I don't think a lot of people know, for example, like the income
Yeah, I
disparity,
think that's a really good
modal,
point.
racial
So,
distribution.
and maybe I can touch on that a little bit in terms of, so, and everybody's kind of mentioned this a little bit, going back probably to your experience in East Palo Alto is very much, and just in case you're not familiar, East Palo Alto is actually an entirely different city. I mean, I don't, you may
Different
and
county.
different county, which some people don't realize. And so if you go back, I mean, for several decades, there were policies in place. So, and we're obviously, we're a pocket inside of this bubble of affluence and in the heart of Silicon Valley. And the students from East Palo Alto, or Ravenswood City School District, which is part of Menlo Park, East Menlo Park and East Palo Alto, traditionally for many decades, were bused across Sequoia district, so into the Sequoia High School, Carlmont, Woodside, and Menlo-Atherton, despite the fact that Menlo-Atherton is right next door, I mean literally less than 2 miles. And so just recently, within the last several years, there was a big boundary map debate, and the boundary map was changed. We were the only community, very small community, of all the feeder schools into the high school district that was split up and where students got bused out to all the different high schools. So with the boundary map change now, the students of Ravenswood District or East Palo Alto are now, they have Menlo-Atherton designated as their home school. And that, you know, I won't go into all of the debates around it, but you had, you know, some folks on one end that were very supportive of that and very welcoming, and then maybe a little more hostile on the other end of the spectrum. So you have, you know, Menlo-Atherton is a very well-known school, highly ranked, great programs, and there was maybe it was a little bit seen as a threat of these students from East Palo Alto coming into our school. And so, you know, like Miriam touched on, and all the speakers really, it's about creating within that, you know, it's obviously a very affluent community, very different experiences, creating that community of support and almost that community within a community. You know, at the same time, really developing that relationship with the high school so that our students are welcome there, and that that we really create this sense, we're building a sense of like, that is your home school. That is your school, whether you're coming from East Palo Alto or coming from, you know, a huge home in Atherton, you are just as welcome there, and that you have this group that will support you and people that want you to be successful, regardless of what district you're coming from, what school you're coming from. So,
Yeah, and I will say that after being there for my 4th year, I've definitely seen some progress at MA for sure. I mean, the school's really working on providing more support for students. They have a tutoring center now. There are 5 different rooms with teachers, and it just definitely, we've seen a shift. We have a new principal now, and so there's definitely been some progress. We have a lot of work to do, but there's definitely been some progress.
I think before we go on to the next question, I just want to point out, I think there's similarities across the 3 schools. We're in a very suburban part of the Bay Area, and you would often, I think from the outside, the perspective is, oh, these are great schools. Gunn's one of the top high schools in the country. I think MA also has a really good reputation, and I think what they've all touched on is there are these communities within these more affluent cities / schools where there are supports that are still needed, and as you're going into these schools, it's to kind of take notice of that. I mean, most of you will be in the schools in an after-school time, so you won't see that kind of contrast or that context, but something to be aware of in terms of the experience of the students that you'll be working with. So just keep that in mind with that commonality. And I think one of the common issues also is affordable housing being really, really challenging in this area, which is often forcing families out. And so you might come across students who don't even live in the communities that they were originally part of. Many families are being forced to move out and then still want to send their kids to these schools. So those issues of housing and displacement are really common things that are going to keep coming out.
It's not uncommon to have students whose parents moved to Texas, but they wanted their kid to finish up high school, and so he's living with a neighbor or an aunt. And there's stress that comes along with that, so we run into that a lot. We also have a lot of students who say, I'm sorry, I can't make tutoring today, I gotta get to my job. And so they're working because they need to pay for their own rent, they need to pay to help with the rent. So we have students who are working from 4 to 10 at Target, 7 days a week.
And to add to that housing crisis that we're in, East Palo Alto went from having 1 city inspector to 6 city inspectors, and so with that, we have a lot of families who are living in like garages, sheds, and add-ons to houses, and so in order to be able to afford to live here. But now that we have 6 city inspectors, lots and lots of houses were red tagged. We had people living, like sleeping at the church and trying to find places to stay because they were getting kicked out of these garages, and so it's
and there wasn't as much that fear of like being, if you were living in a garage, it wasn't necessarily something you before were hiding.
Yeah.
And now it's much more kind of going into hiding and not talking about that because it's against it violates.
There was actually a really good, I think it was CNN special a few years ago about Silicon Valley and affordable housing and how it's affecting families and the contrast between a family living in a garage, and then the family's living in Palo Alto mansions, and I'd be happy to send you the
that'd be
link.
great.
It's about a 15-20 minute thing, but I think it really addresses the housing component really well, so I'll send that to you all.
Yeah. So I think we probably have time for one more question that you all can maybe think about, and I'll combine some of the questions that I sent to you. So a lot of the students here have had some experience, some have had no experience working with high school students. Maybe they've worked with elementary school students or students in other kinds of community settings. So if you could think about some advice or things for students to keep in mind, and also thinking about the election and kind of the current political climate, thinking about social political issues, and then also keeping in mind these are high school students who are vibrant and who are doing amazing things too in spite of all of this stuff. Just some words of advice or things to keep in mind as they're entering these placements next week. Maybe we'll start on Kendra's end and go to the other.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I guess some things I would say just really quickly, the things that come to mind is despite all of these challenges, and one thing I've learned over many, many years, going way back when I first started teaching, right out of Cal, actually. I didn't get to get that plug in, yeah. Over here in Stanford territory. But these students, these families are some of, or the most resilient children, people I have ever had the pleasure really to work with, and it's really been, it makes me emotional as well. I'm glad I'm not the only one, but just really honor that, I would say, honor the depth and the richness of the experiences that they bring with them. It may be very different than your own, it may be similar to your own, it may be different from the students in Atherton or Redwood City, but just really honor that, honor what they're bringing to the table. And then my advice would be to just be authentic. Don't feel like you have to be this person or that, or just be authentic, be yourself. They will sniff out insincerity, and if you're not authentic, they will smell that really quick, and it really does a lot, I think, to damage the trust that you're trying to build with them. So just really, honor what they're bringing with them to the table, and be your authentic self that way. Right?
And I have a couple things. When you are working with them in the after-school program, it's going to take some time for them to feel comfortable working with you. So instead of saying things like, do you need help? Finding different ways to engage them, like, oh, let's see what you're working on so I can see how you're doing, or things like, can I look over your work to make sure it's right? Really giving them their space, don't be too pushy, but also if someone says, no, I'm good, it doesn't mean that you don't come back to that student the next day. You can try it again. Always, introduce yourself and reintroduce yourself, and once they see that you keep coming back and that you're consistent and, you've built that presence and that trust, and things are a lot easier from there on out. But just know that it takes some time, and it doesn't mean they don't want your help. It just, a lot of our students have dealt with teachers who come and go, and people who come and go in and out of their lives, so it takes time to build that trust. And so I want you guys to understand that, and also know that if a student is not really thinking about school right now, or doesn't seem stressed that their grades are low, or doesn't want to do any homework, it doesn't mean that they don't care about their academics. Oftentimes there's a million other things going on, like, am I going to have something to eat tomorrow? Am I going to have to leave at the end of the weekend? So just going in, understanding that really helps for you guys to know that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're doing your best. It's just, it takes some time.
And Miriam, I know for each of you, I've talked a little bit about post-election kind of dynamics at the school. Is there anything that they should keep in mind in terms of what the climate kind of seemed like before the break?
Yeah, so there was a student walkout right after the election, and everyone was worried about it. But it ended up being something really, really amazing at MA. It was very unifying. Over 1,000 students walked out, and not just students, MA staff, admin, campus relations, teachers. It was, I walked out with them. It was really, really unifying to see everyone come together and be supportive. And I did bring a quote that the principal sent a series of emails and was very supportive about what was going on. And there was a quote that really resonated with me that she said, and I want to share it with you, so give me 1 second. It is upon all of us to display empathy for each other, to look beyond your own reality and try to understand the way others see the world. Be understanding that regardless of who you supported in the election, there is a lot of discomfort, fear, and uncertainty for many MA students. And so I think people have stopped talking about it as much as they were talking about it at the very beginning, but it's still a big fear for a lot of our students. And so just know that those fears are still happening. But MA also hosted an information night, which was back in December, brought a lot of different community organizations together to inform parents about their rights, maybe some potential changes that could happen with our new president. And, yeah, that's pretty much what's going on there.
So all these big and heavy things are happening, but at the same time, they're just like all of us, where they're like, am I gonna get a date to prom? Does that guy like me? Oh, she's so cute. How can I say hi? I'm so nervous. I'm a big dork. I have a zit on my face. Like, they're still having all those normal worries that you can kind of remember. And I love that, at the end of the day, we were all awkward teens at some point. So it's okay to talk about that stuff if they bring it up. And they might ask you actually a lot of stuff about your own personal life. Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? What do? Are you going to this party? Can I Facebook friend you? And my recommendation is to, I really want you to be friendly. I do not want you to be their friend. So there's a very significant line there, and I'm happy to talk to you about it. But little things that can help is how you dress. That sounds dumb, sounds superficial, but dressing a certain way is going to help kind of draw a line a little bit. Don't social media with them, even if they request and request and request and request. Just want to keep kind of a professional distance. The name Atlas was sort of chosen on purpose. Pre-Google, pre-Waze, pre all these things, you used to have to sit down and figure out how I was going to get from point A to point B using a map. And figuring out there's lots of ways to get there, but I think this is the way that works for me. And I really want you to feel at ease when you're at the school that you don't have to have the answers. You're not Waze, you're a map. You're sitting next to them, and you're not even the map. You're just sitting next to them looking at a map, and there's a lot of ways to go. And I just want you to talk about, gosh, if I was faced with that assignment, I don't have a clue what the teacher wants. That's hard. Let's see, what could we do to figure it out? And walk with them to figure that assignment out. Because in modeling that for them, you're showing them how you would approach that issue. They're going to watch you do it and see that, like, even though you had no clue what to do and panicked a little bit, you were able to figure out a solution. Talk to your friend. Did you do a similar problem from before? Is there a website we can look at? And so you don't end up becoming the answer key that they think they need to do all their work, but rather you are sort of scaffolding that can then be removed whenever the time is right. And they're like, oh, okay, last time Luis did this, so I guess I'll do that now, and then they get to work. So it's okay if you're working on something that you don't know how to do it. In fact, sometimes the best tutors are the ones, I was horrible at math, but I'm a pretty good math tutor because I don't think like a math person, and so I'm able to help other people who don't think like math people to figure out, okay, I don't know, but this is how I would tackle this as a non-math person. So keep that in mind as well. And I promise you won't be faced with any academic material that you can't tackle because you are all very good at school. Which brings me to my last point, which is it can be kind of disorienting, and Luis, I'm sure you can corroborate this. We all eventually at some point got pretty good at school, and we were rule followers. And so if the teacher said did this, we did this plus 10 other things. That's not always the case for all of these students. And so Don't let it get to you if they're a little bit rude at times. Don't let it get to you if they don't follow the rules and you're like, what the hell? The teacher told you to bring your book and you didn't bring it? What? Oh my God. Why were you? I would never have done that. So try not to project too much of yourself onto how they would do it. They just have a different way of doing it. And they have been amazingly resourceful up until now. Some of them are so good at acting like they know what they're doing that they have the teachers fooled. And then they're like, oh, but I got promoted and I got away with it, and now you're figuring out that I really don't know math, that I have some serious building blocks missing in my math formation, and now the beep has hit the fan and I have to figure this stuff out and start plugging in holes. So that's a very humbling experience for them when they realize I've been faking it a little bit and now you caught me and I'm embarrassed and I'm uncomfortable and I really want your help. And because of these 3 reasons, I'm going to make it a little bit hard at first, but if you keep coming back, they will eventually, you'll figure out what's missing and they'll let you in, and it's amazing. So, thank you.
Wow. I'm trying to think of what I can add. Yeah, wow, you guys touched on everything. Actually, Kendra, I was like, she took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, authenticity that was the first thing that came to mind. As any high schooler, yes, they will sniff it out, and it's a wrap. Mm-hmm. If they think you're being ingenuine. And then patience also. Because we at Gunn and the College Pathways program in particular have faced a lot of challenges with getting and keeping community volunteers, there is a little bit of hesitation because it's the idea, well, how long are you going to be here? Mm-hmm. Am I going to come back in 3 weeks and it's going to be someone else? Or so consistency and just like, hey, I'm in it for the long haul, not getting your feathers ruffled too easy because they will push your buttons. Intentionally, all the time. But just like, hey, I'm here and I'm staying and we're gonna do this together. Like, it's not an option. It's not a, I'm good and no, you're here for a reason. So if you were good, you wouldn't be here. And that's kind of like, I'm like, hey, if you're really good, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. So let's try a different approach. So just being creative and, just tough skin. At least initially. I promise they're not that bad. I haven't gotten clawed up too bad, but at least initially, and then from there it's awesome. So yeah, everything that everyone else has said, I think, speaks to our students as well.
And Myesha, I know before break we talked a little bit also about post-election kind of the things that happen, and maybe you can just reflect on climate at the school.
Yeah. So I think pretty similar to probably the other schools, maybe to a smaller degree, just because our underrepresented population is significantly smaller in relation to the general population. But we have had, unfortunately, a few instances of racially motivated bullying, targeting some of our Latino students, which the school, in terms of administration, has handled pretty quickly, and I would say, as appropriately as possible, but there is still a sense within that community of students of just a place where they had felt somewhat safe. I think up until recently, it's no longer a safe place. So, and again, it's not, things have, kind of blown over, so to speak, but there's still hurt feelings and, like I said, just uncomfortableness. And there may be assumptions that students make even about you based on how you look when you walk in the room. So you've got to be willing to, just, I don't want to say own that, but accept it and realize it's not personal. And we'll work through it and move past it. But I can't imagine that you would be asked about your own political views or how you voted or anything uncomfortable like that. They're not usually wanting to engage on those kinds of conversations. But if you have an experience or something that you think is appropriate and would like to share, they do love to hear about what y'all cool, especially Stanford students. You guys are just like, oh, like if you got there, like you've overcome everything. So, as much as you feel is appropriate, I think kind of what you said, keeping the line between friend and friendly as clear as possible, but again, letting them learn from your mistakes. I think that probably is the most powerful learning experience for them, is to realize, hey, I made it here. I made it to college, not just college, but Stanford, but hey, these are some of the things that I probably would have done differently, or, if I had it to do all over again, this would be my advice. So, much more receptive to hearing it from y'all than from me, because I'm ancient. So. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I do want to take a little bit of time if people have questions, and if you have specific questions about a site or any general questions, we can take a little bit of time to engage the guests up front. Any questions, comments? Go ahead, Mary.
So at Sequoia, would I be working with one student consistently, or is it like a group of students?
So a big thing that I imagine we share across the board is that schools are hairy creatures and you need to be ready to be pretty flexible and pretty much a self-starter. I will try to control the situation as much as possible and plunk you into a situation where it'll be you with one other student or maybe you with another student, 2 students. I cannot promise that. Things change, students change, classes change. And so there will be a few weeks of moving around and figuring out a good match and a good subject. Because our students are behaving so well, some of you might actually kind of get embedded in classrooms where the students are in class, and the teacher will kind of have you working with that student, but not tell the whole class that. You know, it'll be there to kind of help out like an assistant, but oftentimes when there's small group work, you'll be working directly with that group of students. It's again trying to get the students, you know, in their classes engaged. There might be, we'll have to see. You might be put into a room where there's 20 math students who need assistance, but you'll sort of know which 2 or 3 are the ones you keep returning to as they get to know you and feel comfortable with you. But they might not show one day because they had a doctor's appointment or something, in which case I hope you would be like, okay, my kid's not here, I'm gonna go over here and help this student. So we'll just need you to be a little bit flexible about that, particularly in the first week or 2. But I think what somebody said about, you know, asking, you know, can I help you? They're gonna say no, they're teens. And it's painful. I would advise you, and again, I'm learning this on the fly with my own kid. I went into parenting so cocky as a high school teacher. I was like, I got this teenage thing, and it's hard as a parent. So as much as you can avoid yes, no questions, but rather say, oh, what are you working on? They can't say no to that.
Tell me what you did.
They'll look at you and they'll be like, why is this lady asking me what I'm working on? And then they'll be like, oh, geometry. Oh, that's so cool. What, you know, and then before you know it, they're showing you what they're doing. And then you're like, oh, that, okay, so, but does that mean this? And then boom, you've stumbled upon the fact that they really don't know what they're doing with that geometry proof. And then you sit down and you be like, oh, let's work on that together. So as much as you can avoid that, do you need me? No, go away. Don't put yourself in that position because they'll get this back down quickly. But they're going to be really excited to ask you for help. The minute they know you're cool, they're going to be all over you. But those first few weeks might be a little bit awkward where you have to kind of circulate and see.
Any questions?
So you mentioned this, I'm not sure if we're going to talk about it more later, but you talked about dressing.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate?
It's such a good question. I know, I researched to see if there was like a show from What Not to Wear about this, because I have seen it all. I mean, I've had, you know, it's awkward, right? Like we're supposed to be above all of these stereotypes of like, you know, if my bra strap is showing, are you not going to take me seriously? Well, you should take me seriously, damn it, I'm a person, right? Like it shouldn't matter, but it does. And so, you know, we had a big kerfluffle about this at our own school, where, you know, at the school, one of the clothing policies is that girls, if they're standing up, the fingertips have to hit the bottom of their shorts. And so the girls armed a big protest saying that that was sexist and that, you know, boys shouldn't pay attention to that and I can wear what I want to wear. And I get it, you know, I get it. We don't want to be in the behavior, in the business of policing clothing. But I guess what really eventually made me feel kind of at peace with this whole thing is we just want to model for the kids what professional clothing looks like. So if this was your little brother or your little sister and they had to go to a job interview, what would you tell them to wear, right? So for my little sister, I'd be like, make sure your bra is covered up, make sure the boobs are not an issue. I'm sorry to be crass, but you just gotta go there, right? So I don't want you guys to dress up, I don't want you to go buy new clothes or anything. What you're wearing is perfect. I mean, all of you look just fine. You know, you had a tank top on earlier, and I would maybe avoid that unless, you know, just because there's a lot of skin and you're a beautiful woman and it gets distracting. So just make sure your clothing is kind of a non-issue. And I don't want to get into sexual harassment stuff and all of that, but if you can just make it a non-issue, where if I said, you know, who's Philip, who was your tutor? Oh, he was that guy, I don't really remember what he was wearing. Does that make sense? That would be really helpful. So it tends to be slacks for guys or shorts, you know, shirts where we're not seeing, you know, you're not buttoned down to your navel or something like that. For guys, it's pretty straightforward. I think for girls, it gets a little bit harder. We have had some of our female interns, you know, get flirted with, and it makes them feel awkward. And so if you know, we want you to look like your lovely selves, but just kind of, you know, dress like you're somebody, I think Teresa Metz, one of the people that used to work here, would tell Stanford interns to dress like you're going to church. But the problem is that less and less people go to church, and then more and more churches are casual, and so people were showing up in all kinds of stuff, and she's like, you wear that to church? You can't, that doesn't work out. So, you know, try and look a little bit more polished. That's my very inelegant answer.
Yeah, I think suit and tie you don't need to worry about, but
Please don't.
No, please don't.
It's not gonna make everybody uncomfortable.
Yeah. And you're in a tutoring kind of role, and so you can be a bit more casual. And jeans are fine, t-shirts are fine. Just, you know, help us keep the hormones at bay.
At Gunn in particular, you'll be working primarily with younger students, so just keep in mind that they will make everything inappropriate. Anything that can be slightly suggestive, they're gonna take it there. So just, you know, try and channel your like middle school self. You know, anything that could be suggestive. So again, and these students sometimes, I mean, although they have a wealth of experience, sometimes can be emotionally immature when it comes to things like that. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
Because some Stanford t-shirts will have like a little marijuana leaf somewhere, or an inappropriate angel doing things in the corner.
Right.
So just make sure you're not wearing that t-shirt that day.
You'll be fine.
You'll be fine.
Or you do, and you know, you laugh about it, you don't wear it again, it's okay. It's okay. So.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You mentioned to be friendly but not be their friend. If at some point a student becomes really comfortable and like wants help or assistance outside of the program, would it be appropriate for us to offer them our contact information, or is our interaction with them only within the program?
So at least for us, we have a confidentiality pledge, and in there were some expectations. So don't social media friend with them. Don't meet with them outside of the time that you have cleared with Sophia and me. It's going to be very tempting because you're so nice and the kids love you, and you're like, well, sure, I can meet with you on Sunday and go over your essay. I'd be happy to do that. Be careful with that. Let me know. There are certain rules that apply for these kinds of school-sponsored events, so we might be able to arrange for that to happen, for you to meet in a public location like a Starbucks or a library, but it has to be kind of passed through the proper channels. And certainly, you know, if this comes up, a student will say, oh shoot, my mom's car broke down, could you give me a ride home? You can't, unfortunately, and I'm sorry, I don't want to put you in a position of sounding like a jerk, but I'd rather you call me and I will go drive the kid home because I have the proper clearance for that. I'm sure you guys are great drivers, but God forbid you get in an accident, that's a whole hill of trouble you don't want to go through.
how about email? Because I'm like, if it's
So,
like
okay,
help
so
them
email is, if you're comfortable with it, that's fine. But it needs to be about school-related stuff. Can I send you my essay to look at it? Sure, no problem. If they're like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Want to come dancing? That's a problem.
Definitely if stuff like that starts to happen, you know, that's part of building the relationship. You know,
Yeah.
check with
Right.
the supervisor, check with me, just to make sure we're all on the up and up about it, because there could be definitely liability issues
And that's where the friendly but not friend thing comes in. So where it's okay to say to them, hey, that was so sweet of you to invite me to your quinceañera this weekend, but I just want to explain that I'm here as your tutor, and it's not appropriate for students to ask tutors of that. And I know you were doing that to be friendly, and your mom encouraged you to do it, and I'm really touched, but it wouldn't be professional for me to accept. So I just wanted to explain why. So you're kind of being the big sister and explaining like that it's not okay, and so that's why this is happening. And another example would be like, you know, they flake on you. I would like for you the next time to say, you know, oh, it's okay, that's not okay. I don't want you to say it's fine, whatever, it's totally okay. And just, I want you to treat them and educate them and say, you know, hey, when you flaked on me, I left school, I drove for an hour to get here, I'm here ready to work. It's really frustrating when you don't show up. And so please, next time, could you please text me with 24 hours in advance notice to let me know you had a doctor's appointment. Stuff comes up, I get it, but please do that. So it's something you wouldn't do to a friend, right? Like if a friend bails on you, you'd be like, you'd handle it a different way. But in this scenario, I need you to kind of provide, that's what I mean by mentorship, where you're being friendly, but you're not the friend.
Yeah.
So those would be sort of two examples.
Yeah, it's a good
Those
question.
are good teachable moments that come out.
They're not academic, it's not, you know, teaching them a math problem or
Right.
all this, but you guys are gonna have a lot of those little teachable moments that are really going, that makes a big impact in their life trajectory sometimes. I mean, it's really modeling for them that, you know, that level of professionalism or kind of the norms and expectations that probably got a lot of you to where you are today. And some of them have, you know, not been exposed to that, or it's not reinforced as much as it could be.
And modeling how you text, the language you use, the emojis you use to text, how you text is really helpful because they're learning that too. They're learning how to send emails. So when you're like, hey, you should send an email to your teacher asking about this, and they're like, yo, do I have to, wait a minute, don't write yo, dear Mr. So-and-so. And when you text them and say, I'm really sorry, I'm running 20 minutes late, you're cueing them on how they should handle that in other
And you can, I would just add to, you can avoid, you know, you're not making a value judgment. Like when I have to remind my students about that, it's none of them saying like the, you know, Instagrammer, I call it, is, I'm not saying that's bad, that's wrong, but it's just like there's a time and place for that. You know, you talk to your friends this way, you talk to tutors this way, teachers, and you know, helping them to understand when this talk is appropriate, when this kind of texting is appropriate, when this kind of dress or whatever is appropriate.
So on that note, I think we're gonna have to move on, but thank you for your questions. Please keep in mind if there's other questions you guys have related to this that don't get covered during the training, let me know. But can we thank the guests here today? Thank you all so much, and thanks for coming back tomorrow for our next training.
No problem.
Why don't we just take a quick 1 minute, like up and